Judge Frank Caprio had overseen 250,000 cases in his 38-year career. He'd witnessed murderers, saints, liars, heroes, every type of person who could step into a courtroom. He prided himself on remembering every face, every name, every case that truly mattered. But that Tuesday morning, when the woman in the faded blue dress walked toward his bench, looked up at him with those eyes he should have known but didn't, and spoke 5 words trembling with emotion, Judge Caprio felt something he hadn't in nearly 40 years, utter, terrifying blankness. "Your Honor, don't you remember me?" The courtroom froze. Judge Caprio stared, desperate to place her. Who was she? Why did she look as if he should know her? As if he must. And why? When he met her gaze, did a cold dread settle in his stomach? The feeling that he'd forgotten something vital, something that could change everything once remembered. Tuesday, January 14th, 9:47 a.m. Providence Municipal Court moved through its morning docket. Judge Caprio had already processed 12 cases, the usual mix of traffic tickets, small disputes, and minor infractions. Case number 2025, CV 4421 was called. City of Providence versus Catherine Miller. Charges: failure to appear for a previous court date, contempt of court. The courtroom doors opened, and a woman walked in slowly, carefully, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. She appeared to be 55 or 60, her dark hair streaked with gray. She wore a simple blue dress that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that drew Judge Caprio's attention. Dark brown eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. Hope, fear, recognition. Judge Caprio had a keen memory for faces. Forgetting someone who had stood before him was rare. Yet as Catherine Miller approached, he felt the first stirrings of uncertainty. She looked familiar, but he could not place her. The way she gazed at him, as if he should know her, made him uneasy. The prosecutor, ADA Michael Chin, presented the case. Your Honor, Emma Miller failed to appear for a scheduled court date on December 3rd regarding unpaid parking tickets. This constitutes contempt of court. A bench warrant was issued, and Ms. Miller surrendered herself this morning. Judge Caprio glanced at the file. 3 unpaid tickets from last summer totaling $180. A missed court date. Standard procedure. He looked at Catherine. Miller, you failed to appear for your December 3rd court date. Can you explain why? Catherine stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her. She did not answer the question. Instead, she said words that made Judge Caprio's blood run cold. Your Honor, don't you remember me? The courtroom fell silent. All eyes were on Judge Caprio, waiting. He studied her face carefully. Should he know her? Had she been in his court before? He saw hundreds of people every month. Forgetting was possible. I'm sorry, Ms. Miller. Have you appeared in my court before? Yes, she said softly, but not as a defendant. Not as a defendant. What do you mean? Miller, I need you to clarify. When were you in my court? Tears filled her eyes. March the 17th, 1985. 40 years ago. I was 12 years old. 40 years ago. Judge Caprio had been a judge only 3 years then. Fresh on the bench, idealistic, determined. You were 12 years old in 1985. Were you a witness in a case? No, Your Honor, she said, voice breaking. I was the victim. His mouth went dry. 1985, a 12-year-old victim. He had presided over several child cases that year, but the details were hazy. 40 years was a long time. Yet something about March 17th rang a distant bell. And the way Catherine looked at him with tear-filled eyes suggested that whatever had happened that day had shaped her entire life. And he had apparently forgotten it completely. Judge Caprio's mind raced back through the decades. March 1985. A 12-year-old victim. What kind of case could have brought a child into his courtroom? Then, slowly, a memory began to surface. Not complete, not entirely clear, but fragments flickering at the edges of his mind. A little girl with dark hair, crying on the witness stand. A man in handcuffs. A mother screaming. Something about custody. Miller, Judge Caprio said carefully, his voice measured. I presided over many cases in 1985. Can you help me remember the specifics? Catherine took a shaky, trembling breath. You presided over my parents' custody battle. My father was trying to gain custody of me and my sister. My mother was fighting to keep us. Custody case. The words narrowed it down. Judge Caprio had handled dozens of custody disputes in his early years on the bench. And what had been the outcome? Catherine's face shifted, an intricate mixture of pain and gratitude crossing her features in a way Judge Caprio would never forget. You gave custody to my mother. You ruled that my father was unfit. You saved my life that day, Your Honor. And you don't remember me. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of devastating truth. Judge Caprio felt a heavy weight settle into his chest. This woman, Catherine Miller, was telling him that 40 years ago, he had made a decision that had literally saved her life. A decision so monumental that she could recall the exact date. And yet, he had apparently forgotten it entirely. Miller, I'm sorry. I don't remember the specific case. Can you tell me more? Catherine Miller began to recount her story, voice quivering yet steady, and as she spoke, pieces of memory slowly clicked into place in Judge Caprio's mind. But what terrified him the most wasn't that he had forgotten the details of the case. It wasn't what Catherine had initially revealed that startled him. It was what she was about to explain about why she was truly standing in his courtroom, 40 years after he had saved her life. She wasn't there about parking tickets at all. Your Honor, Catherine began, her voice steadier now. In 1985, my parents were getting divorced. My father wanted custody. To everyone else, he seemed like a good father. Successful businessman, nice house, respected in the community. My mother was a waitress. No money, no education. On paper, it looked like my father was the better choice. Judge Caprio listened intently, the memory slowly sharpening. But her mother had known something nobody else did. My father, Catherine continued, voice trembling slightly. He hurt us. Me and my sister Emily. Not obviously. No broken bones. But he was cruel, psychologically abusive, and he began touching me in ways a father never should. Judge Caprio closed his eyes for a moment. Yes. Now he remembered the custody case, a mother's allegations of sexual abuse, with no physical proof, only the testimony of a terrified 12-year-old girl. The case, Catherine said softly, came down to whether someone believed me or not. I was 12. Terrified. I had to testify in front of my father, in front of everyone. And you listened. You really listened. Even though there was no proof, even though my father's lawyer said I was lying, you believed me. Judge Caprio's hands trembled slightly as the full memory returned. The little girl on the witness stand, her voice barely audible. The father, charming and confident, insisting the allegations were fabricated. The pressure from colleagues warning him he was making a mistake by trusting a child's uncorroborated testimony. And yet, he had looked into that little girl's eyes and known she was telling the truth. You gave custody to my mother, Catherine said. You ruled that despite her financial situation, she was the safer parent. And you were right, because 3 years later, my father was arrested for molesting his new wife's daughter. He went to prison for 15 years. The courtroom was completely silent. You saved me, Your Honor. And my sister. Catherine's voice faltered, unable to complete the sentence. Judge Caprio felt tears forming in his eyes. Miller, I'm glad I made the right decision, but I am ashamed that I don't remember you, that I forgot such a critical case. You've handled thousands of cases since then, Catherine said gently. I understand, but I thought about you every single day for 40 years. You're the reason I survived. You're the reason I got to grow up. You're the reason I have children of my own now. Judge Caprio wiped his eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that a decision he had made 4 decades ago had rippled forward in ways he had never imagined then. His gaze shifted to the case file in front of him. The contempt charge, the missed court date. Something still didn't add up. Why would Catherine Miller, someone who clearly revered him, deliberately miss a court date in his courtroom? Unless she wanted to appear before him again. But why? Judge Caprio studied her more carefully now. Miller, I need to ask you something. These parking tickets, the missed court date. Did you want to appear in my courtroom again? Catherine's expression answered his unspoken question before she even spoke. Yes, Your Honor, she said softly. Why come here in person? Judge Caprio asked, his voice steady but curious. Why not just contact my office? Catherine's hand shook slightly as she replied, because I needed to ask you something face to face, in a courtroom, where it's official. A chill ran down Judge Caprio's spine. Ask me what? Catherine drew a deep breath. Your Honor, my sister Emily, the one you saved along with me. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. She was only 49. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. Emily had a daughter, my niece, Sarah. She's 14 now. And Sarah's father, Emily's ex-husband, he's trying to gain custody, just like my father did 40 years ago. On paper, he looks perfect. Steady job, nice home. But I know he's dangerous. Sarah has told me things that sound exactly like what my father did to me. Judge Caprio felt his heart tighten. Custody cases weren't part of municipal court. They were family court matters. I know, Catherine said quickly. The hearing is next week in family court. A different judge, someone who doesn't know our history. Someone who might make the same mistake everyone wanted you to make 40 years ago. Grant custody to the parent who looks better on paper. She reached into her purse and carefully unfolded a piece of paper. I wrote you a letter, she said. It details everything Sarah has told me, everything I recognize from my own childhood. I'm not asking you to rule on the case. I know you can't, but I want you to forward this to the family court judge, to help them see that sometimes children tell the truth, even when there's no physical evidence. Judge Caprio's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the letter. He knew this was highly irregular. He couldn't officially interfere with another judge's case. But he was staring at the woman he had saved 40 years ago, now desperately trying to protect her niece from a similar fate. He faced a dilemma: follow the rules and stay silent, or bend protocol to possibly save another child. Miller, he said slowly, what you asking? I can't officially intervene. It would be inappropriate, possibly grounds for judicial misconduct. Catherine's face fell. I understand. I'm sorry. I just didn't know what else to do. You're the only person who believed me 40 years ago. I thought maybe. Let me finish, Judge Caprio interrupted gently. I can't intervene officially, but there is something I can do. He picked up his phone and dialed. This is Judge Caprio. I need to speak with Judge Patricia Morrison in family court. Yes, I'll hold. Catherine watched, hope flickering in her eyes. After a moment, he spoke into the phone again. Patricia, I need to talk to you about a case coming up next week. Sarah Williams, custody dispute. Yes, that one. I have historical context that may be relevant. Can I see you this afternoon? He hung up and looked at Catherine. Judge Morrison is an old friend and a brilliant judge. I'll share your letter with her, not as an official filing, but to provide context. I'll explain why sometimes children's testimony deserves trust, even without physical evidence. Catherine's tears flowed freely. Thank you so much. Judge Caprio placed a steadying hand on hers. I need you to understand. I can't guarantee how she'll rule. She's independent. Her decision will be based on the evidence. All I can do is ensure she has the full story. Catherine whispered, just a chance. Someone to listen, like you listened to me. He nodded. That's all I can promise. Regarding your contempt charge, he added, it's dismissed. The parking tickets still need to be paid. Can you cover the $180 today? Yes, Your Honor, she replied. Good. Pay the clock on your way out. He paused, looking at her with a faint smile. Miller, I'm sorry I didn't remember you, but I am grateful you reminded me. You've given me a gift today, knowing a decision I made 40 years ago mattered. Catherine wasn't done yet. What she said next would explain why she hadn't simply sent a letter or made a phone call. She needed to stand there, inside Judge Caprio's courtroom, and look him directly in the eyes. Not because of the tickets, not because of the charges, but because there was something she had never shared with anyone, not even her own children. A truth she had carried silently for 4 decades. Your Honor, Catherine said, her voice barely holding steady. There's one more thing. Something I've never told anyone. Judge Caprio remained quiet, giving her space to continue. That day in 1985, she said, when I was on the witness stand, when I was describing what my father did to me, I looked at you, and you did something that changed my life. Judge Caprio frowned gently. What did I do? You nodded, Catherine said. Just once. Very small. No one else noticed. But I did. In that moment, before you ruled, before you spoke, I knew you believed me. Her hands shook as she wiped her tears. That single gesture, that nod, is the reason I survived. 4 years afterward, when life got hard, when I questioned myself, when I wondered if maybe I had imagined everything, I remembered that nod. I remembered that one person with authority, someone who mattered, believed me. Catherine looked straight at him. That's why I had to come here in person. 40 years ago, you didn't just issue a legal decision. You gave a 12-year-old girl permission to trust herself, to believe her memories, to know she wasn't broken or imagining things. Judge Caprio couldn't speak. He was overwhelmed by the realization that a moment he barely remembered had carried her through decades. So thank you, Catherine finished quietly. Not just for the ruling, but for seeing me, for believing me when no one else would. Judge Caprio rose from the bench, something he rarely did, and walked toward her. What followed would become one of the most talked-about moments in the history of Providence Municipal Court. Standing directly in front of Catherine Miller, Judge Caprio opened his arms without saying a word. Catherine stepped forward and collapsed into the embrace. Crying openly, the courtroom watched in stunned silence that a judge was hugging a defendant, an act that violated protocol, tradition, and strict professional boundaries. But in that moment, Judge Caprio didn't care. Thank you, he said softly, only loud enough for her to hear. Thank you for reminding me why I chose this job. Thank you for telling me I made a difference. And thank you for trusting me to help Sarah. I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure Judge Morrison understands what's at stake. They stood there for nearly a full minute before Catherine stepped back, wiped her eyes, and managed a small smile. I should let you get back to work, she said before she could turn away. Judge Caprio spoke again. Catherine, before you go, I need you to know something. She paused. You said I saved your life. But meeting you today, hearing what that decision meant, you saved something in me too. You reminded me that every case matters. Every ruling carries consequences far beyond this room. And every child who stands before a judge deserves to be heard, believed, and seen. His voice grew firm with conviction. I won't forget you again. I promise. And I won't forget Sarah. That girl deserves the same chance you were given, and I will make sure she gets it. Catherine nodded, unable to find words that as she turned to leave. Judge Caprio called out one final time. Catherine, when Sarah's case is decided, no matter the outcome, will you let me know? Yes, Your Honor, she said softly. I will. That very afternoon, Judge Frank Caprio sat inside Judge Patricia Morrison's chambers, carefully telling her Catherine Miller's story and handing her the letter that started it all. Judge Caprio explained the parallels between the events of 1985 and the present day. He emphasized how crucial it is to believe children, even when there is no physical proof. Judge Morrison listened carefully, a seasoned family court judge whom Caprio trusted implicitly. Frank, she said after he finished, I appreciate you sharing this with me. I'll take it into account, but I must base my ruling on the evidence presented in this case, not something that happened 40 years ago. I understand, Caprio replied. I'm not asking you to decide a certain way. I just want you to remember that children can tell the truth in ways that don't always appear in reports or medical records. I will, Judge Morrison promised. A week later, the custody hearing for Sarah Williams began. Catherine Miller sat in the gallery, her hands clasped tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. Across the room, Sarah's father looked composed and confident, backed by a high-powered attorney. Sarah, now 14, sat quietly beside her aunt, her story eerily reminiscent of Catherine's own experience. Subtle psychological control, inappropriate touching, fear disguised as love. Judge Morrison listened intently, reviewing all evidence and speaking privately with Sarah. She considered the father's clean record, financial stability, and apparent devotion, but also weighed the history and testimony before her. In cases of alleged abuse, Judge Morrison said, her voice steady, especially when coming from a child. Courts must carefully balance protecting children from harm while ensuring innocent parents are not wrongly accused. This balance is never easy. Catherine held her breath. Having heard Sarah's testimony, observed her demeanor, and considered the historical context provided by family members, I find her account credible, the judge continued. Although there is no physical evidence of abuse, there is a concerning pattern of behavior. Therefore, I award primary custody to Sarah's aunt, Catherine Miller, with supervised visitation rights for the father. Mr. Williams may petition for expanded custody only after completing court-ordered psychological evaluation and parenting classes. Tears filled Catherine's eyes. Sarah reached over and held her aunt's hand. They had 1.3 days later. Catherine returned to Providence Municipal Court, not as a defendant, but to fulfill a promise. What she carried would touch Judge Caprio deeply. She walked in during a recess, and he immediately noticed her. "Catherine, I heard about Judge Morrison's ruling. Congratulations." "Thank you, Your Honor, for everything," Catherine replied. "I want you to meet someone." A teenage girl stepped forward. Dark hair, serious eyes, yet a lightness suggested a burden had been lifted. "This is Sarah," Catherine said. Judge Caprio descended from the bench and shook Sarah's hand. "It's good to meet you, Sarah. I'm glad you're safe now." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said quietly. "Aunt Catherine told me what you did, how you believed her when she was my age, and how you helped make sure someone believed me, too." Sarah reached into her backpack and handed Caprio a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you something. It's simple, but I wanted you to have it." Caprio unfolded the notebook paper. A handwritten letter read, "Dear Judge Caprio, my Aunt Catherine says you saved her life when she was 12. Now you helped save mine at 14. I don't know if I could have told the truth if Aunt Catherine hadn't shared how you believed her, even when nobody else did. Thank you for showing me that sometimes adults listen. Sometimes people in power care. Sometimes the system works. I'll be okay now, and when I grow up, I want to help other kids like me. Thank you for starting that chain 40 years ago. Thank you for believing my aunt, because that's how you saved me too." Sarah signed the letter. Sarah Williams. Judge Caprio read it twice, tears streaming down his face. Catherine and Sarah were crying too. "May I keep this?" he asked. "It's yours," Sarah replied. Caprio carefully folded the letter and put it in his pocket. "I'm going to frame this," he said, "and hang it next to my law degree. This letter, this is why I became a judge." He looked at Catherine and spoke softly. 40 years ago, I made a choice that protected you. Today, you've given me the greatest reward any judge can receive, the certainty that this work truly matters, that our decisions travel far beyond the courtroom and into future generations." Catherine smiled gently. "Your Honor, there's one more thing." "Yes. Do you remember nodding at me while I was testifying all those years ago?" He paused. "I do now. You told me about it." "Well," Catherine said, tears in her eyes, "I want you to know something." I'm nodding back. She smiled through the emotion. 40 years later, I'm nodding to thank you, to say I see you, and to say I believe in you the way you believed in me. She gave a small nod, so subtle only Judge Caprio could notice, and this time, he nodded back. Years later, Sarah Williams graduated from law school at just 24 years old, specializing in family law with a focus on protecting children. Catherine Miller sat in the crowd, glowing with pride. Judge Frank Caprio was there too, retired now, but still showing up for milestones reached by lives he had once touched. During her valedictory speech, Sarah said, "I became a lawyer because when I was 14, two people believed me, my Aunt Catherine, and a judge who believed her 40 years before that. This is for every child who needs someone to listen, someone to see them, someone to nod." After the ceremony, Sarah approached Judge Caprio and handed him a small box. Inside was a miniature gavel, engraved with words, "The nod that changed everything. 1985, 2025, forever." Overcome with emotion, Judge Caprio held it carefully. "You taught me," Sarah said, "that the smallest gestures, a nod, a moment of belief, can save lives. You didn't just rule on cases. You changed generations." Judge Caprio looked at her and understood something deeply true: we never know which moments will matter most. A quiet nod. A decision that felt routine. A choice to trust a child when proof was limited. Those moments ripple forward, touching lives we may never meet and shaping futures we may never see. Sometimes, decades later, someone walks back into your courtroom and asks, "Don't you remember me?" And even if memories fade, the impact never does. Justice isn't only about a ruling in the moment. It's about everything that comes after. The lives protected, the children saved, the faith passed forward. Judge Frank Caprio kept Sarah's letter and the miniature gavel on his desk for the rest of his life. Whenever doubt crept in, he would look at them and remember this truth. He may have forgotten Catherine Miller's face for 40 years, but she never forgot his nod, and that single nod saved 2 generations.